All right, next you're going to hear a conversation I had with Roderick Romero, and he is a Treehouse pro, and he was on, he had an episode on Treehouse Masters. He has a very neat style where he builds birds' nests into many of them, and he also has built tree houses for Finca Bella Vista in Costa Rica, as well as just for many famous people around the world. He's built all over the world and has been doing this for some time. So here, have a listen as we had a phone conversation about many of the neat things he's doing. And here we go. Tell me about what's going on, I guess, with TV. Are you? I saw something about Treehouse Masters. Were you on Treehouse Masters?
Yeah, I shot one episode with them in Memphis, where they brought me in to build a giant nest sculpture up and around this treehouse that Pete Nelson was doing for Treehouse Masters. Because Pete and I have known each other since like 1997 or something, way back. And
okay.
So yeah, I did that, and then we just shot 6 houses together of mine for the show coming up on February 27th. I think it's going to air, and it's going to be called Ultimate Treehouses.
Ultimate Treehouses?
I believe that's going to be the title of the show.
Awesome.
It kind of closes out his new season, so it's I think it's going to be like a 2-hour special where he starts on maybe shoots in Japan, then shoots on the West Coast, then comes out and shoots. Well, he shot a bunch of mine, and then he went to Germany, and so that's gonna be really cool because it's like my latest work, which is great.
Oh, that's awesome! And you've built how many tree houses in all now?
It's somewhere in the 50s.
Okay. And is this what you do full time then? I take it.
Yeah, it is. I was full time. I did music for a long time. I had a band. Well, I still have it. But the cliff notes is I was pre-med in college, and then my last semester I switched to theater, and then I went to grad school in Paris, and then I started a rock band. Because I'm originally from Seattle, and then I got signed, and so I did that. And around 1997, I got asked to be part of this big 100-acre art show out in the forest, and they asked me what I would make, and I said, I'll build a giant nest up in that maple tree, and it'll be a place where people can kind of go on their walk through the forest. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I talking about? I don't know how to do that. And then I just kind of figured it out with another carpenter friend of mine, and that was the first one. So that was 97. And then the second one was for my brother, and then the third one was I really lucked out. It was for Sting and his family in Italy. So that kind of, next thing I know, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do this for a while. And
That's awesome.
18 years later.
I grew up in the mountains, and so we grew up building forts and tree houses, and I can recall one such fort that we dug out at the bottom between 3 redwoods, and put a canopy about 30 feet up of all tree branches, and we ended up sleeping up there over and over again. We'd sometimes stay a couple days out there, and our parents would start yelling, David, come home. But we migrated from smaller to bigger. That was our biggest, but our first was in the trees, our second was underground, and our third was kind of in between. So I've always had an affinity for tree houses, and I ended up in music with a music degree as well. And so the musician side takes you to the creativity of construction is kind of like the creativity of music. And once you've recorded, you've saved your music. It's kind of like construction. Once you've built it, it's there, it's done,
yeah, exactly.
And people can enjoy it and continue to enjoy it, and that's awesome. I think that's...
Yeah, and it's open to interpretation. Each each person kind of brings their own, their own view to it and their own feeling, and the houses kind of take on their own life, which, like a song or an album. I agree with that for sure.
And that nest idea looks like it's set with you in multiple designs, huh?
Yeah, it's just been a big theme, one, I guess that the nest building is a big part of what I do, but it's all based on me having a passion for sustainability, and that I only use reclaimed and salvaged wood, and I also, and then again, just pruning branches from trees for the nesting, and finding fallen trees and having those milled on site, and that's just been a real huge focus for me. And I love working with the old wood from barns and such, because they just seem to have these really rich stories in them, and then reinterpreting them into putting old lumber from I've used stuff from the 1790s on, and it's just, I don't know, reconfiguring that up in the trees is I don't know, it's just so much fun. It's so rewarding for me.
Well, I think the excitement about the whole sustainability movement that I saw coming through the Living Off the Grid page was in the beginning when I shared cob, and people didn't know you could build with the dirt that's out there, and so this understanding we've gotten so ingrained with, I have to go to Home Depot to buy something, to do something on my house, and the re-emergence of the idea that you can go outside and find things to build with is just, everybody is super excited when there's something that's actually functional that you can do with what's outside. And
exactly.
And so I think that's so neat, is when you use all reclaimed materials, and we have so much junk out there that there's always something you can find to work with. And
absolutely, there's so much, exactly. There's already enough in the world. I don't need to, obviously contribute to some clear cut somewhere to use that lumber. It's ridiculous. I always equate it, because it's more expensive, of course, to use reclaim and salvage, just because of the process of repurposing it. But it's like organic, food. It's like it used to be a lot more expensive because of, supply and demand, I suppose. And that's the same with salvage wood. But now there's just a lot more out there, and there's a lot more people that have made that their niches. Finding old barns that are being torn apart and then mulched, and instead they're like, no, we can reuse this, we can
well, in 20 years ago 20 years ago we didn't have Craigslist, and I remember moving out of our home of 16 years in the mountains of California, and it meant run after run after run to the dump for my dad, getting rid of all our old stuff in the basement. And today, with Craigslist, everything changes hands instead of going to the dump. It's like, put it on Craigslist first, see if somebody wants it before we haul it, And
oh, absolutely. That's changed everything in a big way. Because, before it was like phone calls. I got the stuff you wanted, and then, there's always someone that wants something. I throw away so very little. I take out the garbage in my apartment maybe once a week. I try to reuse almost everything, and I compost all of my vegetables, and here in the city, which a lot of people don't do because they don't really have a place to do it, but I have a really beautiful community garden that I've been working on for 14 years, and so compost has been a huge focus of mine there at the garden. So
awesome. And I love the ingenuity of the internet, because you can then find what can I do with this compost, and now you learn that, I can heat a greenhouse with compost. So
exactly.
and how do we do that? Go watch a video. We can figure this out.
Yeah, exactly. Like every time we'll move into a different region for a project too. It's all there. It's like, oh, here's the variety of trees we're going to be able to work with. Here's the flora and fauna of that region, and then it's like, oh, well, here's this local mill that has been handed down from generation to generation, and you get to meet all these old guys and then their kids who have taken over the business, and it's just so amazing. I love the process of it, and I love going into old salvage yards for windows and doors and just certain things that will fit into the treehouse. It's like a giant collage, of found objects.
That's awesome. Awesome. So as far as traveling, I guess, do you pretty much get people that contact you and say, hey, I've seen some of your work. I want you to, can you travel to such and such and build me a treehouse? And they foot your airfare and take you out there and you go to work? Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, that's pretty close. It's all word of mouth. I don't advertise or anything like that. It's all things like that we're doing, which are just so helpful in a way. It's people writing articles or small TV productions and such. Just then people find out about me, and I'm pretty accessible to get a hold of. And then we set a schedule. I come out, see the site, walk the land, get a feel for where I feel the best place would be to work, to build, and then meet with the client and get a feel for what their use will be, what's the function of the treehouse, and then I'll go back to here in New York and I'll start drafting and then put my measurements of the possibilities of tree combinations into AutoCAD, and then with my AutoCAD person that works for me, we'll come up with plans and designs, and I'll send that over to the client, and then if it gets approved, then we'll set a build and budget schedule.
That's awesome.
Then just I'll usually go with, I have a crew that I love working with and trust, and so I try to take them everywhere I go for the builds. And then I also always pick up a local person who is really familiar with the local suppliers and artisans that I might be able to work into the project. So I'm almost always have a local person on hand.
Okay, that's awesome. And as you go different places, you run into different people. I think about somebody here locally who makes his living making things out of cedar, and there is always cedar is considered a nuisance to most farmers, and so he goes out, and farmers that are chopping down a bunch of cedars that are in the way, they suck a lot of water out of the ground and whatnot. He'll go out and basically rescue the wood and go with the trailer, pick it up and haul it away and use it for furniture. And so I think I think about that. I think those are the types of people you're usually looking for in each region, something like that, where they've got access to portable mill and that kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. I finally hooked up with someone when I started the Botanic Garden Project in Brooklyn. And then there was all the trees at the Botanic Garden that were destroyed during Hurricane Sandy here, and they lost about 110 trees during that. And so I heard that they're just going to turn that into mulch because they can't resell it or give it away just because of liability. And so I proposed, why don't we build a structure and try to find a mobile mill and remill all the lumber and build like an observation treehouse nest for kids and adults and everyone to just come and have a place to sit and read a book inside the garden. And that was awesome because then I met John Duvall, and he had just bought this beautiful state-of-the-art mobile mill, a Miser, and he's a sawyer from up on the Hudson River, and now we've probably collaborated on 10 houses together, just bringing him on site, finding fallen trees or trees that have been tagged to to be fallen because of safety and such on the properties, or if they're thinning an area, and then we'll just take those over to the mill and then run our dimensions and build with that. The mobile mills have really, they've really helped me. They kind of made a quantum leap in what I can get my hands on.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's something that I think is a big. I don't know when they came out. I wasn't made aware that there was such a thing as a mobile mill until a couple of years ago.
There used to be something, I think it was called an Alaskan mill, which was basically using a chainsaw and strapping that onto the tree and running that up and down and taking the bark off and cutting beams with it. And it's a real kind of rudimentary device that was used for a very long time as far as a mobile mill. And then, they just been hybriding these things. And gosh, the one we're using now is just amazing. It picks up an 18-foot with, 40-inch diameter tree, rolls it into the machine, plug in the numbers of what we need. I need like a 18 by 12 foot beam by 18 feet long, and it just runs it for me.
Wow.
And then dumps it on the side, and then we stack it, and then we'll run our 2 by 10s for our joists, and then we'll run our decking, and it's just amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, how's your schedule right now? Do you have anything coming up that you're building? Or are you in the middle of building right now, or what's on the horizon?
I just finished a really long run of 4 houses in the last maybe 6 months. Maybe it's been the last 10 months. It's just been non-stop, so I finished up around the 21st of December, and I'm taking January just to, I need a little downtime just to, find inspiration, and it's just good to kind of rest the bones and spend more time with my daughter. So I'm gearing up to go out to LA to meet with the client for the pilot of the show, and that'll be the next build, unless I jump on something else out here in the meantime. I'm kind of debating that. I just want to be really ready for the big, for starting to film the show, and just finding inspiration for that. So.
Well, that's awesome. Awesome. Is there, so are you scheduled out beyond the show? Do you have any private builds scheduled, anything like that, or right now it's pretty open in the long term?
It's fairly open. I have a few options of things like I could do right after the LA build, especially while they're editing. So I'll try to keep myself really busy in the spring, summer, and fall. Last year I worked all the way through the winter, and it was brutal. But we were working in 8-degree weather, and
got to do Florida tree houses in the winter.
Yeah, it's brutal. But I just did a project in Hawaii, which was fantastic because it was starting to get really cold here, and my crew and I went to work on a project on Maui with timber bamboo treehouse, and that worked out really well. It was more like an observation deck and a thatched roof and bamboo roof. So it was all, and bamboo's amazing to work with, so strong, so flexible, and also, of course, sustainable because it's a grass, basically. It just grows like mad, and if you cut it, it grows right back up. So it's
nice.
That's been neat. I found all these great farms that build, that grow bamboo, and I reached out to them, and they all flocked to it by, knowing that, wow, this could be a whole nother, venue for them to supply bamboo to. So that was great, and it was a fun learning curve. I've worked with timber bamboo before, but this was a lot more complicated than, say doing a pergola or something out of bamboo.
Wow. Well, I always deal with people that have, because America is a place where we have 30,000 different municipalities. Each has their own building codes and structure of local government. What do you run into in building in different areas as far as building codes? Do you have to deal with some areas much more heavily than others, and requirements, or are most places pretty open to a quote treehouse?
90, I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the time I'm building so far in the woods for the client that we don't apply for permits, just because, well, one, I'm usually not hooked up to a power supply, a grid, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm out there building, and then there's minimal, if at all, electricity in the house, and there's no plumbing. And with tree houses, I found that almost every single county rules that if there's no electrical, no plumbing, then you don't need a permit. A few cases where I was building in kind of a high-pressure area, such as the Hamptons, or even in Bel Air, there in LA, I built it and then applied for the permits as a kind of as-built, and once it's all done, then it's easier to show them the plans and have them walk through it and inspect engineering. And the times I've had to do that, they've all been signed off on. That's kind of how I approach it. I just kind of get going, do it, and then ask later if I have to.
Well, with us artistic types, sometimes a treehouse is a project of creation that develops around the structure of the trees and so forth. So it's often I imagine it would be hard to set out plans when you go, wait a minute, I've got another tree to work with here.
Exactly.
What lumber are you cutting from? You can't really specify 4x4s if you're using natural timbers and things like that. So
yeah, I'll come up with a real conceptual design, and then I'll come up with a set of plans so we can know what the amount of lumber we're going to need to work with and the materials we're going to need to, and then I just kind of get it all on site, and then organically just start building and somewhat stick to the concept, but almost 100% of the time you just leave the plans on the ground and start doing what you really want to do up in the air. It gives the client a good security, like, oh, they kind of know what they're doing. And then they see the process, and they love that because we're flexible. It's not like we're prefabbing walls, in a warehouse and then trucking them to the site. It gives them a great deal of freedom and flexibility on saying, oh, what about if we expanded this way? Or, wow, now that I'm up in these trees, what about if we went over to that tree with another platform? And I'm always open to that. And, if it's in any way plausible, I go for it.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I love what you're doing. I'll keep a open ear here to what you got going on. Love to chat some more in the future. If there's anything you want to say or get out there, or to get word out about somewhere you're going to be. If you're planning to go to, like, you're going to LA, if you want more work in LA, well, people are going to know you're coming that way. So
yeah, exactly. I really do. That happens a lot, where I'll be somewhere working, and then another, like, that client will have friends over for dinner or cocktails or something, and then while they're there, they're like, oh, you should go look at our treehouse, and then next thing you know, I'm getting a call from one of their friends. In Connecticut is a perfect example of that. I started one in Roxbury, Connecticut, and then now 2 years later, I've built 8 within 20 miles of each other.
Oh, wow.
So, I love that. Like, while we were in Hawaii, people came by knowing that we were out there building, and they knew of my work and would stop by and ask a lot of questions, and then I'd follow up with them to see if they really wanted to do it. And a lot of it's, oh, sure, we'd like to talk to you more about it in the future. And some of them come back and go, oh, we really want to move on this, and that's wonderful. And they, I attract like-minded people because they understand that my approach to designing architecture is, well, in Hinduism it would be called, well, it's basically, do the least amount of harm, ahimsa, basically. So that's my approach, is doing the least amount of harm, is making sure that I'm respecting the trees, I'm respecting the natural surroundings, and I'm also not contributing to, again, some sort of deforestation somewhere else in the world. And so people that are in tune with that gravitate towards me, and that's been great, because I'm already going in and they already understand that that's why they chose me for the projects. And then they learn from my building more about sustainability, and I learn more about them. And I have such a great relationship with everyone I've built for. They're like, because they have one of my pieces of art, and it's like a kid to me, and I get to go visit them every so often. And I'll go back and sleep at their treehouse and wake up in the morning and go, oh, you know what? Maybe we should work on this a little more. Or maybe have someone come in and open up that gap around that tree, because it's 2 years later and the tree's expanded in girth. Because I always work in mature trees so that they're not growing except in the last 10% of the tree, the canopy. And so it's great to go back and just look at the work, see how nature has adapted to the house and vice versa.
Sure. Tighten up a couple bolts.
And again, just that's the main thing for me. It's just fitting in. I always, it's kind of one of my things is saying that really that nature's the architect, and I'm just trying to find out the best way to fit in with the surrounding.
Sure. I know one of my greatest, the reason I love tree houses is so much because my dad built one for us when I was about 5, and it sat in that same tree till I was 19, and we moved away. And it connected 2 trees. It was kind of a platform, almost like a deck, with we slept out there many times looking at the stars, and then he added a zip line from it to get down, and we had so much fun as kids there using that treehouse that just absolutely love the feel it gives. It wakes up the kid in you.
Oh, completely. That's absolutely it. That's, I think, one of the reasons. I mean, there's a couple reasons why I think treehouses have just become so a part of the, I don't know if you could call it pop culture in a way, is because I think it's just, this return to your childhood. You get up in a tree and you kind of leave the day-to-day grind behind you, and all of the, it's heavy, the reality can become so stressful, especially if you're watching the news on a daily basis. And you get up in the trees and you're like, oh, I remember climbing up in a tree as a kid. Or like it's like, oh, I remember when my dad and my brothers and we all built a tree house together and all the good times up there. And then suddenly you're up there having fun, the kids are up there having fun, and the tree house itself can be kind of a porthole to another a part of the forest and nature that they might not have been that aware of. Or people sometimes rarely walk out into their own woods, and some people have 150 acres and they barely get out there. They have a fence on the line that kind of contains the manicured property, and then there's this huge forest that they don't go into. But you go to treehouse, suddenly they're looking deep into their forest and going, oh, we should explore that more. We should make some very small trails to go on these walks, and the next thing you know, they're just reconnecting to nature, and again to their childhood that they might have lost or at least smothered down just to deal with the so-called adult reality. Well,
I think so often we grew up night hikes every night into the woods, living in the mountains, and
yeah, that's awesome.
And in today's world, it's from work to the remote control into the garage, into the house to the remote control to the TV, and that's the majority of life, and for most people, and so reconnecting with the outdoors is so important.
It is. you nailed it. It's like, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's extremely high of people just, the first thing they do is wake up and turn on the television to see what happened overnight, and they have it on while they're making their coffee, and then they jump in their car and they listen to talk radio or whatever, and they're submerged in more media, and then they go to work and they're in their office and they're, you know, overwhelmed with the daily tasks, and then they get back in their car, listen to more radio, get home, turn the TV back on, fall asleep to the TV, and start all over again. And it's like, wow, what about, you know, what about experiencing nature? And, you know, I live in New York, and I, again, work with the community gardens, and I'll bring kids from the schools and let them pick carrots out of, you know, what my plot or someone else's, and then teach them again about compost and stuff. Some of these kids, you know, they've never picked a carrot out of the ground or pulled a peach off a tree or an apple or climbed up in the tree and picked cherries or something. It's mind-boggling. And next thing you know, they're like, can we come by again? I'm like, it's always open for you, please. You know, and I give them all my phone number, and, you know, I set up tours, and it's just awesome for some of these schools, because next thing you know, they're inviting me or other people I work with to come make a vegetable garden at the school, and then next thing you know, they're putting a garden on top of the school roof, and it's just amazing how a simple thing can inspire this whole ripple effect of consciousness, and it's our past and it's our future. For some reason, during the industrialization of Western civilization, it seems to have, it got lost, it got smothered, it got, you know, pushed down in the consciousness, and now it's coming back because more and more people are becoming aware of, you know, the damage we're doing to the planet, and reconnecting to nature. They know that this has to happen if we're going to sustain any kind of reality as human beings on this beautiful planet.
Well, and, you know, in growing up in California, you know, I say I came from the mountains. It was the California mountains, and we considered everybody down below as flatlanders, and they all lived in the smog, right? And we were up above the smog, and
right.
And so when we would go down and visit people and meet people down in the valley, San Bernardino and Riverside and all that, I'd run into people that are like, oh yeah, I've never been out of the city. And I'm like, but the mountains are right there. You know, the escape, it's right up the hill there. You know, and
exactly.
And people get so rooted in the city and city life, and don't really get that escape or that vacation or that chance to get away. And so a lot of what we do in the sustainability movement is to bring the garden into the city. Let's not be pure solid pavement, but let's bring the green in, you know.
Yeah, exactly. There's people in the city that don't get up into the mountains, and they also don't go jump in the ocean.
Uh-huh.
You know? There's this vast world out there in water world, you know. And I found people, like, even on Hawaii when we were there, that they've lived on Maui for, say, 20 years, and last time they swam in the ocean was 12 years ago or something. I'm like, how is that possible? You know, and I don't want to judge them, but it's like, wow, I just can't even fathom that. You know, but it's people, you know, can be very habitual and into their patterns and set in their ways and their, you know, daily migrations. It's easy to see how they get stuck, but you pull them out for one moment, and next thing you know, they're going and getting hiking gear, and they're getting tents, and they're setting up a little family trip that's going to be along the coast or up in the mountains. It's like suddenly their whole life changes, and
well,
that's beautiful for me.
I think there are good camping trips and there are bad camping trips, and some of the bad camping some of the bad camping trips, I think, start around the places that you go in the wrong time of the year where the bugs just attack horribly. And I've been to those places where the flies swarmed so bad and attacked in the middle of the woods, and I think I was in Alabama at a rest area. I got attacked so bad I was like, oh my gosh, get me out of this state. And so I suppose the experiences you have in the forest can be attributed oftentimes to that as well. And so being in a time of the year where it's not horrendous. You know, being out in the woods, having a good experience is important. And
absolutely.
And you know, you
yeah,
go.
It's like it's that preparation that, you know, people go, oh, let's just do that, and not research it. Or, you know, and another, I guess, a great thing about the internet is just, oh, let's go online and let's get reviews of when is the best time, when, you know, there are less people, but also less mosquitoes and all these other things that they need to tune into, and then they get the information and they go a little more prepared and educated on the experience and what they're going to be, you know, be exposed to, the wildlife and the weather patterns and such.
And being in Washington State, where my parents are, you know, there's not a whole lot of bugs out there. It's pretty nice. You can go out just about anywhere and enjoy the outdoors.
Oh, for sure.
But
that's where I grew up, Seattle, yeah.
Here in Oklahoma, where I'm at now, we spent summer of 2012 really out in the thick of the woods, and I call it the Oklahoma jungle. And having been there, I'm like, no wonder they put pavement so far, because the snakes and the bugs were so prevalent. And so, you know, you go, okay, yeah, well, I want pavement up, you know, 20 feet out from the house, because I don't want those things up. And so,
right.
So you kind of tend, and you tend to, you know, and that's where you try to decide, okay, what is a sustainable solution here? Is it for, you know, let's leave that Oklahoma jungle kind of untouched and everybody live in the city so we don't, you know, harm all of that forestry? Or do you, you know, which is the sustainable solution? You know, we love to think, hey, I want to go live in a cabin in the woods and build off nature, and maybe that's the sustainable solution. But sometimes bringing the people in together in the metro area might be the sustainable solution for the planet. So making those decisions is always a conflicting one, I think.
Oh, sure. You know, architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, I think, understood that very, very well. You know, and again, just why spread out and, you know, the urban sprawl into these beautiful areas. It's like, okay, let's build cities are fine. It's like, but they can, you know, let's make them, you know, a city that functions well and flows well and has mass transit. And so then nature doesn't get consumed by all these developments and such. And so there has to be that balance, and there has to be that consciousness, so that nature can be experienced. You know, more and more land is being consumed instead of preserved. But I think that movement's coming back around. I really do feel like there's a shift in the consciousness, and that people are becoming more and more aware of how precious our forests and parks are, except, you know, in certain areas of the world where Western civilization's been able to exploit those areas because they don't have the consciousness yet, and then it's too late because they've cut so many trees. Then there's, you know, deserts where there was jungle, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a give and take, and you know, an ebb and flow of the consciousness and the movements. And I know I love that there's more even blogs and websites like yours and stuff that, you know, just expose more a large audience to all the possibilities, and that there's a lot of people out there in this movement.
Well, and understanding our past so we can understand the future of where we're going is important, really critical. And I thought it was I thought it was really neat to see. And you know, and as I write for the page and as I share articles for the page, I find really exciting things that I'm like, oh, I got to share this with everybody. This is cool. And the other day I ran into the Cape Cod and how the sand dunes that are there. There's these sand cabins that have been out there since like the 30s and before. They were built to survive and be kind of mobile as the sand covered them to raise up and as, you know, dig down as necessary. And so there's some of these cabins that are built on top of another cabin on top of another cabin over time. And
that's awesome.
But what was so unique about this place is here you're in these dunes that look awesome for, you know, four-wheeling or whatever, and you see it and you think, okay, this is sand from the ocean because it's right against the ocean. But as the story goes, it was a completely forested area that when England came over, that was the forest they took up to build all their houses. And so what is sand dunes looks like desert now used to be a beautifully forested area. And now now it's a state park that is protected, so you can't mess up the dunes. But really, that was a forest before. So understanding that, it's like, okay, so do we want to put the forest back and protect the forest there, or do we want to protect the dunes that's there now? Or, you know, it's an interesting.
No, it's totally true.
Interesting how things have morphed.
It is, and I think the bottom line is, in the end, is, well, nature contains nature, and so there can be disruption, there can be disruption, but in the end, nature will endure. I hate to say that humans are a virus, but in some ways they are. They come in and do massive destruction, but nature will come back. Nature is so resilient, and maybe those dunes will return to be a forest now that there aren't people coming over and destroying it. That it gets put into a preserve, and maybe in 100 years you'll definitely see a different reality there.
Well, and we have been an influence on nature, and we see that by the Dust Bowl, how the Dust Bowl came, and who knows, the Middle America could have been the Sahara Desert had we not had that interaction that stopped the Dust Bowl. And the Sahara Desert, we look at it and go, was that a man-made issue, or was that just there? We don't really have we didn't have the internet 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, so.
Right.
So it's scientists' best guess,
Well, it's like you said, learning from the past and applying it now so that we can affect the future in a positive way.
That's awesome.
And it's like, I'm not going to hold back on that, because I have a purpose and a message that I want to get out there, and I want to share it with other people that are in the same, movement. And
sure. Thank you all for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this segment with Roderick Romero and the images of many of the tree houses he's worked on through the years. Feel free to contact him at his website or by telephone if you're interested in having a tree house built. He does schedule a long ways out, so you'll want to plan way in advance. But thank you for listening, and have a nice day.